Hello there, welcome to Stay at Home Cinema, brought to you by TIFF and Crave. We're streaming live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and at tiff.net/stay-at-home. Are you staying home? I'm Cameron Bailey, I'm the Artistic Director and co-head of TIFF. Tonight we're watching Looper, and we are taking out the future's garbage. This is a movie we will start at 7:30 p.m. Eastern. We'll press play then, and I'm very excited about tonight's guest, the writer and director of Looper, Rian Johnson. I want to begin with some shout outs. First, we are speaking to you. I'm speaking to you from Indigenous land, so I want to shout out all Indigenous storytellers and their communities from coast to coast to coast. Shout out to all frontline workers who are working to keep us safe and healthy and fed. To all levels of government that support what we do at TIFF, Government of Canada, the Province of Ontario, and the City of Toronto. To our donors, our members, you're keeping us going. Thank you very much for all of your support now and over the years. And a massive shout out to our corporate partners, including our lead sponsor, Bell, and our major sponsors, RBC, L'Oreal Paris, and Visa. Looper was the opening night gala at the 2012 Toronto International Film Festival, and I remember that night well because we were all taking a risk. Up to that point, we'd usually opened the festival with Canadian films, and here was this big, guns-blazing Hollywood movie with Bruce Willis and Joseph Gordon-Levitt and a whole lot of special effects. What would our stakeholders think? And for the people at Sony and E1 that brought us the movie, Looper was a commercial film that they hoped to make a whole lot of money with at the box office. Would premiering it at a film festival make it look too arty? You know who made all of those risks go away? Rian Johnson. Looper's writer and director is that rare creature, a thoughtful, ambitious artist who makes really good popcorn movies. You might have seen his Star Wars: The Last Jedi. 3 of Rian's films have premiered at the Toronto Film Festival: Looper, The Brothers Bloom in 2008, and last year, Knives Out, which went on to score him an Oscar nomination for Best Original Screenplay. Rian began his career with a brilliant high school film noir, Brick, and he's continued to show how he can make familiar genres feel completely fresh time after time. Rian Johnson, welcome to Stay at Home Cinema.
Hello, Cameron. Hi. How you doing, man? Good to see you.
How are you?
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to wear a shirt with buttons on it. Which is very exciting.
I should have done the same, but I'm glad to see you.
Well, you look sharp. You look good.
Yeah, thank you. How is your lockdown going?
It's, it's just like everybody else's, I think. We're all just feeling our way through it. But I've been looking forward to this all day. Let me put it that way. Yeah.
What do you remember from 2012, 8 years ago now, when Looper premiered at the festival? What was that like for you?
Well, it's funny hearing you describe it because all the memories came flooding back of, obviously I have a lot of memories of the actual night itself, but I really remember the lead up to it. For all the reasons you said, it was really kind of going out on a limb, both for you guys at the festival and for us and for Sony and everybody. And I remember in the lead up to it, talking to you and talking to my producer, Ram, and just feeling like, and just thinking about, because we had been at TIFF with the Brothers Bloom with our last movie, and having seen some movies there and knowing the audience is there, and I just had like a feeling like, no, you know what? I have a feeling this will be just the perfect place to show the movie for the first time. And then the opening night, Joe obviously and Bruce was there, and Emily, and it was kind of overwhelming, and to show it, to that huge a crowd, and I don't know, it was really magical. So yeah.
It kind of blew the roof off of Roy Thompson Hall, I remember.
It was fun, man. It was really fun, and it was like, and it was the sort of, I don't know, there are so many different films that you see at festivals, and part of the fun of the festivals, you never quite know what you're going to get when you sit down. It's why anyone who has a festival in their town, I always encourage you to get tickets for it and go to the screenings if you got a good festival in your town, because there's nowhere else movie going wise where you can sit down and literally know nothing about what's about to unspool in front of you. You're going to see a trailer, you're going to see a poster, you're going to hear your friends talking about any other situation. With a festival, there's something so magical about really rolling the dice, and when the lights come up, just the promise of what it could be. And so in front of a TIFF opening night crowd, to have, like you said, Bruce Willis with guns blazing, it was really fun.
Right. You're a little bit of an anomaly in Hollywood in that you are the sole writer and director of Looper, as you are of most of your movies. You could, adapt other people's scripts. You could develop other projects with other writers, as is often the way with studio movies. What do you get from actually sitting in that solitary process and creating the story, the screenplay from start to finish, and then directing your own script?
Well, for me, it's kind of just the way I know how to do it. It's the way that I started out with my first movie, Brick, and it's kind of I mean it's sort of, for me, put it this way, to show up, for me, that the only way I feel like I can really be confident is to show up on a set and take the wheel with confidence. With all these talented people working on it. Part of what gives me that confidence to do it is having come up with the idea from the start and really knowing it from that first seed of what the original thought was all the way through. I know why literally every single decision was made throughout the creation. I know why every line is there in the script. But I don't know. I mean, obviously there's, it's not the only way to do it. Obviously, I mean, there's, some of the best filmmakers of all time adapted and worked from other people's scripts. So there's other ways into it. But for me, it's just what I'm used to, I guess, and it also, I don't know, the ways that, for me, especially because, like you said, it made me very happy to hear you say popcorn movies. That's what I want to do. And for me, knowing the ways that they are also intensely personal, even if that's deeply submerged underneath if it's the very bottom of the popcorn bucket, that for me is always important.
A lot of people have commented on how Looper really brings together kind of a crime fiction, almost film noir feel with some elements of science fiction with the time travel element. These are genres that I think a lot of people are very invested in, but you somehow managed to do new things with them. Can you talk a little bit about just the appeal of genre for you as a writer and a director? What does that give you? Because there are really rules with every genre.
Yeah, that's what I like about it. I like the fact that the way I usually put it is you have a chessboard when you're sitting down with the audience. You have defined limits of the game, and it first of all, it gives me a starting point in terms of writing. It gives me boundaries, which I find really helpful creatively. It also gives, which I think is very interesting, it gives a dialogue, kind of an unspoken, almost meta layer dialogue with the audience, where the genres I've done so far have been ones that are pretty familiar genres, and so I assume a level of familiarity with the audience with the genres. That means they know when I'm giving them what they expect from the genre, and they also know when it's deviating from that. And so that in itself becomes part of the text of the movie, which I find really interesting. I mean, hopefully it's just carrying them through and entertaining. Hopefully it's not just, kind of a meta dance, but that element of it is a fun thing to play with.
So you mentioned that there's some sort of personal kernel in your films, even though they might be popcorn movies, they might be working with established genres. Can you talk a little bit about what is personal in Looper specifically for you?
Well, it's I mean, it's the most boring thing in the world it's much more interesting to watch the movie than to hear me kind of talk about what's the personal elements of it. But it's I mean, the other nice thing about science fiction specifically as a genre is, and I'm not going to be saying anything that other people haven't articulated much better, but this is not new information, but it lets sci-fi very much lets you cloak very human stories in mythologically elevated terms. And so, you know, Looper is very much about a father and a son sitting across the table from each other, and the son saying to the father, I'm not going to turn into you. I'm not going to make the mistakes that you made. And that's at the heart of it. And is a story, you know, when you're telling a story, if you can do that, but put it in these terms where you have this time travel element of it, and it's literally the same person staring into the eyes of yourself. If you're taking basically what's the subtext, you know, what's kind of underneath that every father-son conversation like that, and manifesting it in a very real way. And so, you know, in terms of sci-fi itself, that's something that's pretty unique and pretty cool. And so, yeah, and for me, that's kind of the heart of it. It also has, the movie also, for me, it was a time when I was thinking a lot about violence, I guess. Violence as a problem-solving tool in the world, and the times when, and I wasn't interested in just writing kind of like a violence is bad type screed, but what I wanted to tap into is a situation where me, myself, like all of us, feel kind of that justified. It's something that action movies tap into constantly, which is another reason this was interesting to me, that tap into that kind of justified, yeah, go get 'em type urge of this is a situation where, yes, you can fix this through violence, but we want to see the hero pick up a gun and kill the right person to solve this situation, and to do something that didn't just kind of like no that, but actually engaged with it and kind of saw it through to its conclusion and all its messiness. That was something that seemed interesting.
We're going to get to some audience questions, some viewer questions in a moment. I want to ask you before, though, about Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who has worked with you in one way or another on every film. Some people might not know that even if he's not on screen in your movies, he's somewhere there lurking in the background. Can you talk a little bit about your working relationship with him, and also what you did together with Looper?
Well, I met Joe when I did my first movie, Brick, and we got really close on that film, and we've stayed incredibly good friends over the years. And he's just, I mean, you know, he's incredibly dear to me, and he's like a wonderful collaborator. And on Looper, it was there were a couple different. I mean, Joe was. I wrote the part for him. I wrote it intending to like work with him on it, and so I was writing to, I guess, his strengths. I knew that he was going to really engage with and thrive with the challenge of becoming like a young Bruce Willis, I guess. And that was the other interesting thing in terms of the casting thing of it, because we ended up getting Bruce for that part pretty early. And I knew that because Bruce Willis is Bruce Willis, it wasn't going to be like Bruce and Joe were going to meet each other in the middle performance-wise. Not because Bruce is incapable of it, but just because he's such a he's such an established movie star. We all grew up watching him. And so an audience was much more familiar with the way that Bruce Willis is on screen at that point than they were with how Joe is on screen. And I also knew that the way Joe is wired as an actor, he was going to take that challenge of becoming Bruce. He finds his way into the interior through the external. He's really good at that. He'll very often find a voice, or the makeup was something that really helped him in terms of embodying it. You know?
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about that? What did you do physically to him to kind of bring him a little closer to the look of a young Bruce Willis?
Well, we had an amazing makeup designer, Kazu Hiro, who's recently we did Gary Oldman's amazing makeup for, and he just won the Oscar, right? Yeah, he just won the Oscar for Bombshell.
And all, yes, for Bombshell. Yeah.
And Bombshell, he's a genius. And Kazu, and he was very reluctant to do it because he showed us he basically turned down the job like a dozen times because he kept showing us pictures of Joe and Bruce and was just like, their eyes are
impossible.
It's impossible. He was like, and we were just like, Kazu, you can do it. You can do it. He was like, I can't do it. And then so he actually, I'm trying to think if I have it hanging up here. Yeah, wait, hold on a sec. I'll get a little thing to
Okay.
show you. This is a thing that Joe gave me after we were done shooting. I guess this is kind of gross, but I think it's awesome. He gave me framed the prosthetics that we
Oh,
used.
wow.
So I can show you exactly what it was. It was, if I can get it without the
A
glare.
nose and a forehead.
It's
What
a
is it?
nose. It's
Okay.
an upper lip to create
Oh,
kind of a ledge type lip, and it's a lower lip to kind of fill it out a little bit.
right.
So it's three pieces, but it ended up. I mean, it was Kazu did incredible work, but it was yeah, it was a pain in the ass, man. And because with any prosthetic, the other thing that happens is as you begin to sweat during the day, there's nowhere for that sweat to go, and so it starts bubbling underneath it. And so we also had another makeup artist on set full time with a needle going up and popping these little sweat zits that would start popping up. And the other thing was Joe couldn't, he had to be, it took, I forget what it took, 3-4 hours every morning to get this stuff on his face. And so he had to be there that early. He couldn't eat with it on or it would ruin it.
Right.
So he had to we had to plan his meals really specific, and they were like liquid, so basically Joe was tired and hungry and uncomfortable during the entire shoot.
I'm sure
he did
that for the performance as well somehow.
Yeah, maybe.
Wow, that is incredible what actors go through. Okay, we've got a couple of questions I want to get to you. One is from TIFF member Amanda Cinerari, who says, your two sci-fi fantasy films, Looper and The Last Jedi, are at the very core about themes of love, loss, and regret. Why do you think it's important to have these human elements in sci-fi blockbusters?
I mean, I think sci-fi in general, it's nothing without human elements driving it. I think in all good sci-fi, it's kind of what I was yapping about before in terms of what it does is take something that's incredibly human and recognizable and project it big and sometimes kind of warped, but in a way that's incredibly impactful on the screen. And so if you're not starting with something that's essentially human, then it's just, I don't know, there's shadows on the wall. It doesn't really mean, doesn't mean anything. That's just the case for any film, any type of film, I guess. But that's specifically what I like about science fiction is you can engage with human drama in a way that really, really, really blows it up.
Mm-hmm. Here's a question from Facebook from Jamie Rebinal, wondering what was the most challenging sequence of Looper for you to capture, and can you talk about trying to perfect that sequence?
Oh boy, let me think. I mean, we had a pretty blessed shoot. Overall, the most difficult thing was the makeup element, but in terms of specific scenes and getting the specific scenes right, I mean, there's a scene in there's Piper Perabo, who's in the movie, who plays like the prostitute that Joe's with at the beginning. She and him have a very intense scene together, and as originally shot, the scene ended with Joe crying and getting emotionally to the point of having that breakdown was something that just took that we did a lot of work on. And then when I got in the edit, we put the scene together, and I realized the scene worked better cutting out before he started breaking down and crying with him just like, and so you see in the finished cut, he doesn't cry at the end of it. Not because it wasn't great. It was an amazing performance. Just one of those wild things. And I guess that's inevitable. Anytime you do a ton of work on set to get something just right, those are always the things in the other room that end up falling away. But other than that, we shot most of the movie. We shot the city parts of the movie in New Orleans. We had a fantastic time in New Orleans shooting, and then we were about an hour outside of New Orleans in a town called Thibodeau, where we found the house that's Emily Blunt's house in the movie. And so the whole crew for the second half of the shoot moved out to Thibodeau, which was awesome because it was like summer camp, and there was nothing we would just all get together at, near the hotel. There was like a Chili's, and that would be where the whole crew would be every night. And it was just like, it was a blast. It was lovely. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Jeff Daniels has a great line in the movie, "I'm from the future, you should go to China." One of our members, Ben White, asks, what aspects about the future world in Looper are relevant now in 2020?
Oh, I don't know. Probably very few. I don't know. It's because everyone's outside walking. Everyone's outside walking
Yeah, true.
without masks. So I blew that one. I should have had everyone in masks and 6 feet apart. Yeah, exactly. So no, it's I think I think the movie is and we have fun with the subtle futuristic elements, like where it's actually this, if you look really closely, we don't make a big deal out of it, but the phones in the movie are foldable phones. They're things that can fold down to like that size, and then you fold it twice and it's like phone size. You can fold it out again. And so the fact that we're now getting kind of the first lurches towards foldable phones, I was like, oh, okay, maybe we got that. Although I hear the foldable phones are terrible. So, but then again, Garrett Dillahunt like is tapping his phone and saying, this piece of shit. So maybe we got there. Yeah.
Exactly. Last question is from Charlotte Arity. Can you talk about your relationship to time travel as a narrative element? Was that a hard thing to figure out because there's so many paradoxes that are involved?
Well, I mean, there's a scene in the movie where they're talking, where Bruce and Joe are talking, and Bruce basically says, don't even, we're not going to talk about time travel. And that, I mean, to me, the thing is, that's not because I didn't do work within the interior logic of the movie. It does actually map and make sense. My attitude towards time travel, but the interior logic of the movie also treats time travel in a way that to me very much makes sense. It treats it as an organic almost like the same way that the rules of the world it's set up, like organic matter, work. And so it's kind of like a messy growing process as opposed to something that is hard math. Yeah. And to me, in general, time travel, the real trick to time travel is it doesn't make sense. It never makes sense. It's a fantasy element. It's like spells in Harry Potter, as opposed to any kind of like science. And I think that unless you're Shane Carruth and you're making Primer, because Shane is a genius and actually knows how time travel works, I think. But for the rest of us mortals, it's something where you have to create an interior system of logic for it within the movie. And then as long as you communicate that clearly and stick to that, and make sure that that serves your themes and serves your story, then I think most audience members will go along with that, even if there are things that, that for them don't quite jive.
Right. Rian, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you.
Got to see your memento from the movie, which is great, and for making Looper as well. We're about to press play on it at 7:30 Eastern Time, 4:30 on the West Coast. In Canada, we're watching on Crave. If you're somewhere else, find Looper wherever you can. Join us. We're going to start it at 7:30, and tweet along. Rian, I hope you'll join us if you can as well, and just share that experience with us. And thanks again. We look forward to whatever it is you're writing now and seeing that when it's done.
Awesome. Cameron, thank you so much. And thanks for everyone for joining.
All right. Thanks, Rian. Take care.